who are doing these things and who are willing in some ways to get together and agree on standards, which is, I think, what's necessary to make this kind of automated inference in a network eventually feasible. Okay, so basically, sort of to sum up this part of the talk, or the first 3/4 of the talk, blogs, open notebooks and so on enable filtered access to new information sources and new conversation. In a sense, they form a collective short-term working memory for groups of scientists, a conversational commons for the rapid collaborative development of ideas. The way I like to think about it is that, in some sense, what these things are doing is they're restructuring expert attention. So what do I mean by that? I just mean, if you look in Tao's blog comments, the very first one actually on that Navier-Stokes post, I'll just give you an example, is from a very well-known mathematician named Greg Kuperberg. So Greg Kuperberg knows nothing at all about the Navier-Stokes equations. That's the first thing he says. I know nothing about this, but blah, 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 his thoughts. And then this conversation gets struck up, and Kuperberg has some very interesting things to say, and it stimulates Tao and so on, back and forth. So here are two people who are engaging in sort of a mutually beneficial interaction that otherwise wouldn't have happened. It's a very small example, but when it's extremely good scientists like that, it's very significant. The reason it's significant is because, in some sense, expert attention is the ultimate scarce resource in science. What I mean by that is, scientists complain they don't have enough money, they don't have enough experimental equipment, they don't have enough this, that. But you can have all the money in the world, and if you're stupid, it just doesn't help as a scientist. But if you don't have much resources and you're very clever, you can do amazing things. It's true that expert attention is it's the key bottleneck. And the more efficiently it can be allocated, the faster science will progress. So what I'm talking about is ways of more efficiently allocating expert attention. So I'm going to sort of finish, my last example anyway, is a completely different way of thinking about the reallocation of expert attention. It starts with the idea of markets, and at least a very common belief is that markets are an excellent way to efficiently allocate scarce resources. How many people here would describe themselves as pro-market? Just out of curiosity. Okay, not many. So, just a quick anecdote. It's from Paul Seabright, who's an economist. Just after the fall of the Soviet Union, somebody visited Seabright in London. It was a very senior official from the former Soviet government, and the question, basically they went backwards and forwards. He was visiting Seabright to talk about setting up a market system in Russia, and they went backwards and forwards, just talking about food and various other things. And the official finally said, look, we really want to understand what the market is, but I just don't. Can you please tell me who is in charge of the supply of bread to London? And as Seabright says, the fact that nobody is in charge of the supply of bread to London is an astonishing fact. As many as the failures of markets are, they do a pretty reasonable job of allocating certain types of resources. Anyway, let's explore the idea that maybe we can create a market for this resource of expert attention. So we'll talk about an online market in expert attention run by a little company called Innocentive. I need to start most of the way around the world in India with a not-for-profit organisation called the Asset India Foundation. And what it does involves some of the 2 million women involved in prostitution in India. And basically it helps girls, typically daughters of prostitutes most frequently, some sons as well. It helps them escape from the sex trade. And the way it does that is by providing training in technology. So they've so far set up 5 training centres throughout India where they've trained several hundred of these girls and placed them with technology companies. And apparently they get an awful lot of requests from local governments, local town level, to set up more of these. They have a problem, though, which is that in many of the towns requesting them, they don't have very reliable supply of electricity. And if you're doing technology training, that's a bit of a problem. So one of the problems that they had was in trying to get wireless routers. In particular, they wanted low-cost, solar-powered wireless routers. And they took a look around. There are a bunch of solutions which are available, but what they specifically needed in their particular situation didn't yet exist. So most of the way around the world, you have in Boston, just outside Boston, the town of Waltham, you have the company Incentive with their online market in expert attention. So what that means is that companies like Eli Lilly, Procter & Gamble, and I think it's about 80 others now, can pose on this site what are called challenges. And what a challenge is it's a scientific research problem together with a prize for solution. So it's a very well specified scientific research problem. You probably won't be able to see this, unfortunately, with the lighting, but that I've sort of put an example up here. It's one of their prizes. It's a prize for finding a biomarker for motor neuron disease. It has a $1 million prize, which is that's high. Typically their prizes are tens of thousands of dollars, some are hundreds of thousands of dollars. $1 million is definitely on the high side. So they have 160,000 people signed up for the site in 175 countries. They've had so far 200 plus challenges have been solved. What's this got to do with Asset, Asset India, the organisation I was talking about before? Well, Asset took their problem, they got in touch with the Rockefeller Foundation, and they said, we need a low-cost solar-powered wireless router to expand what we're doing. Rockefeller, in turn, got in touch with Incentive and said, we'll put up $20,000 in prize money for a good design for this, one that meets all of their requirements. They broadcast that out to the rest of the world. 400 people downloaded the challenge. That doesn't sound like very many, but actually to download a full description of the challenge, you have to go through some hoops, so it's a reasonable number. 27 of those people submitted solutions, including one from this guy, Zachary Brown. He's a 31-year-old software engineer from Texas. He's the person who won the prize. He got the $20,000, and Asset got their design for low-cost solar-powered wireless router. Now, what's interesting about Zachary Brown is his characteristics. This is a guy, so he's a software engineer, very interested in open source, which is one of the things that to keep everything low cost, Asset strongly designed in the design. His hobbies were wireless radio and solar power on top of that. Right? He was, at the time, he was basically transitioning, he was changing his home office. He had a plan to change his home office completely over to being operated under solar power, and he was going to do all the modifications necessary. So he was kind of, he was the right guy to be talking to. And that's the advantage of having 170,000 or 60,000 people to be broadcast to. I should say there's sort of a nice, happy coda to this story, which is that it's now being prototyped at the University of Arizona, the design. So I've been very enthusiastic about all these new ways of doing science. A skeptic might say, many skeptics do say, aren't all these new forms of contribution just a distraction? As a scientist, should you blog when you could instead be writing papers? Should you contribute to Wikipedia when you could be writing grants? So why? Well, actually, let me stop and just talk a little bit about this.